Good afternoon, everyone. We are coming to you on our digital platforms to bring you the very latest on the investigation into the Uvalde Elementary School massacre. The State House Investigative Committee that has been investigating the shooting at Robb Elementary on May 24th and the law enforcement response to it just released their preliminary findings to the families of the victims. State Representative Dustin Burrows of Lubbock is the chairman of this investigative committee and is set to hold a press conference in Uvalde right at 4 o'clock, top of the hour. Here we are after meeting with the families there. You're looking live at the podium now as we wait for that press conference to begin promptly at 4, but we can see people there now. In the meantime, we can tell you families have received a 77-page written report that details what it calls systemic failures that went beyond the local police department as they pan over and showing people arriving here at this press conference. That report includes surveillance video that the Austin American-Statesman and KVUE, our sister station, obtained and then released last week. That was on Tuesday. And while we wait for this press conference to begin, I'm joined now by investigative reporter Cheryl Mercedes, and you have been poring over that report, yes. 77 pages. And Marcelino Benito, who has watched the video released to families, which is a little bit different than what we saw Tuesday last week. But Cheryl, let's go ahead and begin with you. Some key takeaways from this report that we all have right here on our desk.
Okay, so first of all, what we're talking about here is what they call a breakdown of communication, right? It's almost like, according to the report and the interviews that were given to the committee, no one knew who was in charge at this time, and there was a lot of back and forth between the chiefs of police, multiple agencies, and officers on the ground, and who should do what, right? And what they were responding to. We have told you before that some officers thought there was a barricaded situation. Others were under the impression that there was an active shooter. So there was a lot of confusion in there.
Well, that changes how you respond, right? If it's an active shooter, you move in. Exactly. If it's a barricaded subject, you take a step back. But you mentioned leadership and who was in command, and everyone always talks about Pete Arredondo.
Yes.
But it wasn't all on him in this case when you're looking at this report necessarily.
No, absolutely. According to this report, and they are quoting Pete Arredondo here, who's the chief of the former chief. He's now on administrative leave, but he was the former chief of the school district consolidated police department. He states, incident commander to him was a title. He didn't know that he was in charge when he arrived. He testified that he believed he was just an officer without a title when he arrived. Everyone was waiting on word from him on what to do next, according to those who assumed he was in command. But let's not forget here that when Chief Arredondo responded, he admitted that he had dropped his communications radio near the fence. Yep. So there was no way of him really to communicate with him or with anyone else. And furthermore, the principal of the school, Mandy Gutierrez, had testified that she wasn't in communication with the chief at all. So, and she was the one who had put the school on lockdown and sent out an alert that there was a possible situation that was an emergency that warranted a lockdown at the school.
Well, it starts right there at the top, right? When you have chaos and you have no one leading you and dictating who's going where, that's where you get that systemic failure and just egregious poor decision making. That was on page 5. Marcelino, something that surprised us, you know what? The video released to the families today, it wasn't even the full video that we watched back on Tuesday. It had some differences.
Well, that's right, Xavier. Subtle but important differences to point out in this case. You know, we're talking about two pieces of video. The piece of video released last week obtained by the Austin American-Statesman and our sister station KVUE, and the piece of video released today shown to families. That's important to note. The one shown to families today is just a tad bit shorter, and one of the big differences is it doesn't show the actual shooter. On the video that we reviewed last week, we aired in full, shows that shooter walking into the campus into the side door that we know now through the report was unlocked after crashing the truck. Another difference that you point out, Xavier, that video we obtained last week, it does not have, the video we obtained last week actually does have the video from outside. You see the funeral home surveillance cameras, and another shot, you see the two people who are actually shot at run back into the funeral home, and then it picks up inside the school. The video the family saw today, of course, did not want to see the shooter. We know on page, I think, 36 of this report, there's an explanation that the committee provides as to why the two videos are subtly different. They reached an agreement with the families. The families did not want to glorify the shooter. They did not want to see him on camera walking into the building. You'll recall another poignant moment from that video that we aired last week is you see that young boy coming from the bathroom.
In the bathroom, and then turns around as he's going down the hallway.
Yeah, and he's actually the first person to set eyes on the shooter as he's way down the hallway, right in front of room 111 and 112. And that little boy actually hears and sees the shooter take his first spray of gunfire from the hallway into those classrooms. And we blurred, obviously, the image of that little boy so we don't see his face to respect his privacy. But you see him run away to safety, we presume. And
then we know what happens after that. This is 77 pages for 77 minutes. There were law enforcement of all different agencies. And it talked about that in this 77-page report, right? The different people and agencies that actually responded.
Yeah, so get this, a total of 376 officers total within that time had responded to that scene, whether that be outside on the perimeter or inside. And we're talking, and I've got the list at my desk, but it is an entire page of agencies, and that doesn't even include every single officer name, but just the agencies.
That's
okay?
The entire hour, though, right? That's not
that.
Okay.
Absolutely,
okay.
That's total. Now, look, just a breakdown of a little bit for you here: 149 U.S. Border Patrol officers, 91 state police, 25 Uvalde PD officers, 16 from the school district police officer, or no, the sheriff's department rather. That's 16 from the county sheriff's office, 5 from the consolidated school district. And then there are a number from U.S. Marshals, Federal Drug Enforcement Agency, and then you've got your county law enforcement officials from surrounding counties who are all converging on this school. So 376 in all.
Nearly 400.
Yeah, think about that for a minute.
Wow.
I mean, you know, think about what the enrollment at that school must be. Is that an officer per child, or, you know, at least one per every 2 child? I mean, that's a lot of officers. We're talking a school with 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade.
It's one thing to have you read every department that was there. It's a completely different thing when you see it on that video. You see all those badges. At one point, up to nearly 24 officers in that hallway that we see.
And that's where I think some people, it's just, it's maddening, right? To see them there and then to know what is actually going on in room 111 and 112. I think that's where, you know, families or anyone really watching the video or following this investigation is so frustrated. Cheryl, what else stood out to you? I know it just came out, 77 pages, a lot of reading, but what really stood out to you in this here in the findings?
Well, not just the miscommunication, but the inadequate security measures at the school, okay? They had an alert system. They had a fence. They had an intercom system, radios. The problem is we hear a lot about keys, right? At one point they say that Chief Arredondo had 50 keys on him.
Yeah.
We're talking about a classroom door. There was no master key. They had keys for different classrooms in that school. How can you possibly find a key to go into that one classroom? And then the number of witnesses who testified saying, hey, that door has not even locked for quite some time. And then teachers testifying, we don't even lock our doors. We use magnets so they don't lock and kids can go to the bathroom because we have so many issues with them. They use rocks to prop the doors open. So there's so many situations where there's faulty security in the school. And not only was just that one exterior door where he entered unlocked, but the other 2 entrances as well they found were unlocked. So if he did not make it through that door, if it had locked, there were 2 other entrances. And let's not forget, when he approached the school, he began shooting at that point, and there were kids on the playground. So that right there really stuck out to me, too.
And earlier in the year, you know, Robb Elementary, they did an active shooter training at that school. And if you guys are just joining us, so we are waiting for a press conference now. The Texas House Investigative Committee is going to address their findings from their investigation. I believe it was now from May 24th, so that was 50... Where are we at? 52, 53 days ago.
Yeah.
So we're waiting on Destin Burrows and some other folks to release their findings that we've just gotten. We're waiting for them to take to the podium. Marcelino, before you came in here into the studio, you know, you said day 7 for you, right? You have been poring over the videos.
I've seen the video way too many times. And it is you mentioned the word maddening. There's a few other choice words that I have when you view it over and over, especially as a parent. You want to jump into the video almost and be one of those officers and actually move in and go in. and they don't do it for 77 minutes. Another key point that I want to make sure our viewers are aware of between the two videos, this one released today to the families did not have audio either, absolutely silent.
But that was from the family.
That was family request.
Yeah, okay.
They didn't want to hear, and you'll recall with the video that was leaked last week, they were upset. Obviously, you heard gunshots and things like that in the video. So the one today that they viewed in private with the committee and with the mayor, that did not have any audio.
And they also took out the part where the gunman walked into the building, but they said in here that was on purpose. That
was on purpose. It's not they don't want to omit anything, but according to the report, they just don't want to glorify the shooter. We were talking, though, and for the sake of transparency and investigation, you could argue that is something important that the public does need to see.
Absolutely. And I think first and foremost, it's whatever the families want, right? The 21 families that lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So first and foremost, that transparency for them. Cheryl, you actually, Chapter 4 was a lot about the gunman, Salvador Ramos. We learned a lot of new information about him, and then leading up to kind of that tragic May 24th day.
Yeah, and at this time, we're going to spend just a little bit of time on him and bring it back into some of our later newscasts. But, there are a lot of tidbits in there about how, sometime in March, they believed he had gone through the outside of the school and kind of scaled it to see, I guess the setup or what was going on. Also that the 4th grade classroom that he went into was his former 4th grade classroom where teachers had testified that he was quote unquote bullied, or he was a child who was shy and performed poorly. And then also a few days, the report says, before he did this, he was talking to a relative of his who's a child who attends the school, one of his cousins, asking about the lunch hour and the lunch period, which was around that time when this attack happened. So a lot of those little heartbreaking details, and also the fact that he didn't know how to drive, that his uncle took him to pick up those guns.
To explain why he crashed the truck.
Exactly. Yeah. So all those little things that came to light. But also want to point out, Xavier, before this starts, we mentioned the alert system and the lockdowns that took place. So let's talk a little bit about the security in the school and why a lot of teachers didn't get the message. According to the report, the committee says they had poor Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah.
Also, since they installed that alert in February of 2022, that's this year, listen to this, 47 alerts they got that were bailout alerts, but
proximity to the border.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so teachers began to kind of get laxed about it, right? So poor communication, some got that alert, some didn't, and then the principal testified that there was never an over-the-intercom alert saying lockdown, or whatever they need to do, whatever the words are they use to tell everyone to get secure in their classrooms and lock the door. So a lot of breakdown in communication within the school, and also we know now within law enforcement who responded.
It's one thing, we can sit here and talk about it and watch it over and over again. And obviously schools now, they do active shooter training. Mm-hmm. It's totally different when it actually happens and when there are real shots being fired. And I think, when you listen to this and you're reading through this report, and it seems like the school did certain things to prepare for an active shooter,
right?
But none of the training they didn't actually do any of the training from the school, at least from that standpoint.
We've heard from experts who've reviewed this video for us that the response time actually was pretty good. Officers stormed in there in under 3 minutes. The shooter had been in there for 3 minutes. Obviously, a lot happens in 3 minutes. But there's no qualms, no complaints about how quickly officers actually got to that classroom. Those first responding officers, you see them on video, at least 2, maybe 3, go right up into right outside the classroom door to try to engage the shooter. The shooter's already inside. A minute later, after they're right outside the door, you see them take fire, and that's the problem. They retreated. Yeah. And active shooter training says you don't retreat. That's when you engage. That's when you engage.
Well, and the report also mentions that more than 100 rounds were fired within the first 2.5 minutes, and officers responded. The first one on the scene in 3, and that likely a lot of the damage was done there.
I can tell you though, from reviewing the video a little bit more closely, there was gunfire sporadically after officers arrived, and that's what's infuriating. If you hear that, if you actually watch the video with the audio, you hear gunshots. Those officers heard the gunshots. You also hear the sounds of children screaming, which obviously we edited out and have not aired. But even despite hearing all that, there was no effort to move in.
And yet, in this report, a lot of them testified that they didn't see the dust cloud from the ammo and that they didn't hear the screams. That is where you're like, okay,
the video is telling a different story.
It's true. And then, but on the officer side as well, you never know what they remember, because that moment is just so, but a lot of them testified, we didn't see, cloud of ammo smoke. We didn't hear screams.
It lacked it lacked a lot of urgency. There was zero urgency from the moment. Well, they got in, and then once they retreated. One of the things, and I wrote down here on page 7, failed to prioritize saving lives of innocent lives over their own safety. And
I wrote that down as well. That right there.
It is what it seemed like. And once again, if you're just joining us, we are waiting for the investigative committee to hold their press conference to see more people starting to file in. It was supposed to begin right at the top of the hour, right at 4. It's now 4:15. As you can see, it hasn't begun just yet, but we are keeping a very close eye on it. This comes, nearly 2 months from that May 24th day. 21 lives lost, 19 children, 2 teachers, and families in that community. I mean, not just families, but that community of Uvalde. Mm-hmm. Cheryl, you just came back, right?
Yes.
You just got back
multiple times.
Life goes on outside of that bubble, but they are still hurting as if it was.
They are. A lot of the relatives, that I've spoken with, they didn't want to do on-camera interviews, but they speak with you and they're at the memorial sites and they're just in tears and so heartbroken, and just for them to mention to me, we're coming to this memorial at the school. We can go to Town Square where one of them once was because, we don't want to go to the cemetery. I get it, and they're surrounded with people who are like, it's like a comfort for them because there are so many people even from out of town visiting. And some of them chose to attend meetings today to get the video and the report. Others didn't.
And families, it was families that were getting all this information first. So families were given this information earlier today. I'm told right now, actually, what they're doing ahead of this press conference beginning, people are signing up and they're going to take questions.
Yes, they are. I was told they are going to take questions from the public and from reporters. So, and just to reiterate here, there's been a lot of questions about, hey, what does this report mean? What does it do? So what comes out of this? Okay, well, this committee is trying to give the public an accurate synopsis of what happened after they did their own interviews, not taking reports from DPS and seeing what they got or what other investigators got, but on their own, listening to the testimony and looking at the data and the evidence. Also, this is going to help them create a change in policies and create new laws. This is why they're doing this. Yeah. So it's important to reiterate that because a lot of people are asking, well, what comes of this? Are there any charges or anything like that? Well, no, there's a federal investigation for that reason, but this is just for state lawmakers to get an idea of, hey, this is what we found. What can we do to improve school safety? Yeah,
this was a fact-finding mission. They wanted to figure out exactly what happened. From May 24th to 3 days later, Marcelino, you have done this, numerous times on how different the story was. And I think that's why this special house was created, to figure out what exactly happened. Not what he said happened, what she said happened. What really happened. And I think that's what. It is extremely detailed. Dating back to when they did their last active shooter training, even at the school.
Well, you're absolutely right. There's been so many issues with this investigation from day 2, from the day the governor showed up in Uvalde. He held his first press conference. You were there, obviously. And we heard the governor give one version of events, that he was briefed. And Cheryl, if I'm not mistaken, we find out who briefed the governor in that report. And it was a DPS lieutenant.
I don't remember his name, but
well, it's not. I don't remember either. But we find out who actually briefed him and where that misinformation came from. What's interesting, Governor Abbott was in town in Houston last week on Friday, and had a chance to ask him about the new video now that he's seen it and what he felt, after he realized what he had said was completely the opposite of what we see on that video. And he said he was just as angry as he was when he learned that everything that he'd said, praising law enforcement for their response, was wrong.
He said they saved lives by going in there and risking their own lives. And after you see this video, it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, it's the opposite.
He also said they displayed amazing courage by running towards the gunfire, and we don't see that
when you see that video.
And we don't see that.
Yeah, it's opposite.
And then when you hear, Cheryl, take us there to Uvalde. When did you get back?
Let me think. Late Friday night.
Okay, so is it 2 days ago?
Yeah.
When you were there, in the memorial, when you see the memorial, as families still show up here, and you see, looks like one of the victims there on that woman's shirt. What was it like being there and sense of community there as you see the memorial still continuing to grow. I know the one in the main square near the fountain was taken down, and there was some back and forth about that. But right outside of Robb Elementary School, more people are just stopping by and still continue to pay their respects and honor them. What was it like hearing from people that are still in that community that have really, this is their reality for the last nearly 2 months?
You know, I talked to them about a number of things that were going on, including this report, the video that came out, you know, donations being made by all sorts of athletic teams. And their response is just like, you know, at this point, nothing's going to bring my child back.
Yeah.
You know, and it's true. And they're just, you know, that a lot of them are, you know, fierce and they're fighting and they want to get to the bottom. And then there's others who are just like, we're done. You know, and so it's a struggle. I believe every day brings on a new emotion.
Yeah.
And it just depends on the person you speak with, right? But I do notice a lot of people, after they saw that surveillance video released this week, traveled to Uvalde and went to Robb Elementary because they felt a draw to be there. They wanted to do something. They didn't know what to do, so they traveled there just to see, you know, just to be there. They felt like we need to pay our respects. But it's really it's emotional. It's overwhelming. It's draining there. Everyone you speak to is just, and they're the sweetest people. You know, they're welcoming you with
small community. That's what it is. Yeah,
open arms. You know, not even 15,000 people live there, and you know, you want water, you want tea, you want something to eat, and I'm like, sir, you're on the corner holding a sign. You know, 8 hours a day. Would you like some water?
Sun.
Would you like? I mean, they're just so sweet.
Yeah. Speaking of sweet, speaking of emotional, speaking of the community, we have sound that we're going to play from you from a pair of fathers from earlier today that I believe were not allowed in the meeting earlier.
At the end of the day, what were you just looking for?
Answer what happened to my baby, you know, and now I'm not going to know what happened, you know, because I wasn't on the list. You telling me I can't go in to find out what happened to my daughter? So who's making that law?
Super mad about it. Like, there's no one that has a right to tell me, like, I shouldn't be included in some of those things. I'm mad. I'm super mad.
So that reporter voice you heard there, that was our Anieli Ruiz. She was one of the first ones there on the scene that day on May 24th. And she's the only one. She's been staying in touch with these families, nonstop talking to them. And she was the only one that was able to speak with those two fathers there who were not able, or actually able. They were able. They were not allowed to go into today's meeting for whatever reason. We're going to get to the bottom of that.
I'd like to know that.
Yeah, but you could still hear it in their voices. They're just disappointed. They're angry. He said he's mad. Mm-hmm. And you can understand why. And you know, we watched the video. Some people are visual learners. Other people learn different ways. When you read this and then you watch the video, it definitely is infuriating regardless of how you divulge information.
It's just compounding. The more information we learn, whether we read it in a report or we see it on video, it just heightens that anger. And you don't have to be just listening to those parents. Yeah. Parents there. It makes me angry that they weren't able.
Yeah, you're a new dad.
That makes no sense.
Yeah.
That absolutely makes no sense. But the video, as you mentioned, does give us that really crystal clear look. It's an unfiltered look, especially the one we showed our viewers last week at what exactly happened.
It's solid video.
The
evidence.
You clearly see faces. You see body cam. You see people standing around. You see the chunks of time.
Yeah.
After that initial retreat, you see officers waiting for 45 minutes. 45 minutes without breaching that classroom. Then they hear gunshots again. They move closer. You would think after hearing gunshots again, that's when they breach. They would move closer, but stall in the hallway for another 30 minutes before finally making the move at 12:50. It's really, you don't understand why.
And you remember initially they were saying they were waiting for more tactical gear, right? That was the big thing in the first week. They were waiting for tactical gear.
They had a lot of tactical gear in
They
those
had
clips.
plenty. They had ballistic shields. They had AR-15s, or they had automatic rifles. I don't know specifically which kind. But they were armed, and they had him outnumbered. And again, it goes back to the training when you're dealing with an active shooter. You go towards the gunfire, which they got there moments after. And the gentleman who's running away, actually, we don't know if he was shot at or what he was running from.
We believe he was actually shot at.
With a bullet. Yes.
So he was grazed with a bullet. So that is the exact opposite, because you're supposed to go at the gunfire. And then it goes back to, in the very beginning, who is in charge, incident commander here. And he didn't even know that he was technically in charge, and then that just kind of leads to the chaos and the utter failure of what happened there on that day.
Well, and according to the report here, Pete Arredondo, the chief at that time, had stated, yeah, we had some items, we had some shields, but when we realized the type of firearm he had, it wasn't enough to protect us. And then he knew the door was steel with a glass panel, and he didn't have any breaching tools that would break that door down. So he was looking for a key, but then we learned later on the door was never locked. So it's just, there's so many conflicting reports. And so it's really interesting to see how each witness here testified and their account of what happened there on the ground.
I know you've read the report
yes.
in detail, so I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you believe, because my question after covering this video for so long, the one question that remains is why they didn't do what they were supposed to do. Do you believe the report offers an answer to that question?
I don't think it does, because everyone's saying we don't know who was in charge. Everyone's saying I was waiting on someone else. And according to the alert training that they got in active shooting drills, they don't need a commander who's the chief. If you show up, you take charge. You take charge. It didn't have to be local. Right. It didn't have to be local. It didn't have to be, federal or state. Whoever could have taken charge of that situation, and no one stepped up to the plate. Later on, there's a member of the Uvalde Police Department who calls his chief, who's on vacation. And he says, hey, there's no incident command post. And he says, okay, go ahead and set one up. Well, that's a long time after.
So
and
the
that
chief was
never
on vacation.
Yes,
It
never happened. That never happened. They never got to the part where they set up an incident command post outside.
And
never happened.
It was utter chaos. And the one thing that is I feel like it is so simple, and it's easy for us to say this here. We're in a studio. But when there's an active shooter, you go at the gunfire.
You sign up for that. Bottom line.
And that at the end of the day, when you're looking at this video, and there was some back and forth, Marcelino, on Tuesday when the video came out. Tony Plahetsky, he works with KView, our sister station, and Austin American Statesman, the newspaper up there. He had seen it weeks before the video was actually released, and there was some people that weren't thrilled about it because they were saying family hadn't seen it. But when you see that video, and for the last nearly 2 months, you hear about this time period where the gunman was in there in the classroom with these kids and armed. You're trying to picture what were they doing in that hallway at Robb Elementary School, and then when you see it, I couldn't really put my finger on it if it was exactly what I thought it would be, or you know what I mean. It was kind of because what else are they doing in the hallway for that long period of time? And it just seemed like more officers started to trickle in, more gear started trickling with tactical gear. I don't know if it made it better or worse to see it.
Well, if we thought the video was going to provide answers, which we were all hoping, it doesn't, in my opinion. It only raises more questions about why they did what they did and why we're watching what we're watching.
Absolutely.
Because I think after every report we'll get, I don't think there is no answer that will suffice for these parents as to why officers are seen on that video for 77 minutes refusing to breach the classroom when you're hearing gunshots and when you're hearing children screaming.
Yeah.
And on Tuesday night, we should also mention, it's online if our viewers haven't seen it, we, on top of the video, we laid down when the 911 calls were coming in, which offers a really good glimpse as to what information was coming in, whether they were receiving that information in the hallway. I think they addressed some of that possibly in the report.
Yes.
That's a whole other question, but it's something else to see what 911 calls were coming in, what those kids were telling the dispatchers when officers are just on the other side of that door.
And the guys who show up and they state in this report, I don't care, man. There's kids in there. We're going in. It's like, yes.
At the end of the day.
But everyone else waited. But that is the attitude it appears that every one of those responders should have had going into there.
And at the end of the day, people are going to be angry, they're going to be mad, and the 21 lives lost, they're not coming back, and that's like the saddest part. Like, we can point the finger, and we can get mad at who we want, but at the end of the day, 21 lives lost.
But look, breakdown in communication, security, systemic breakdown.
Systemic breakdown, systemic failure. All right. Well, they are still getting signatures, and we are still waiting for this Texas House Investigative Committee to come and address the media. They're actually going to answer questions. People are still signing up for that. We are going to have much more. We're going to have it on our digital platforms as well, so tune into that, the KHU11 Plus app, our YouTube pages as well, and of course, both of you are coming back. We're going to have much more tonight on the KHU11 News at 5. Aniela Ruiz is there live as well, yes. So we'll see you then.
They'll make brief statements, each of them, and then we'll begin questions from the media. We're going to have a hard stop of 5:30 so that the committee can go over to Church of the Sacred Heart and take Mass. Anybody have any questions from the media right now, how this is going to roll? Yes, ma'am. Just the committee up front. Just the committee, yeah. Okay, thanks all. I'm sorry? If we can finish up the press questions, for sure. This has been billed as a press conference. We just met with the families up at the junior college.
Okay, the House Committee on the Robb Elementary shooting will now come to order. Clerk, call the roll.
Representative Burrows.
Here.
Representative Moody.
Present.
Justice Guzman.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Okay, a quorum is present. First, let me say this. If you're going to ask a question today and you were not able to fill out a witness affirmation form, a WAF, you can still ask your question. Just send an email to Paige and she'll get it to you, and that should not be a reason why you cannot answer. What I would like to do today is start with this. If there's only one thing that I can tell you is there were multiple systemic failures. I would invite everybody to read the entire report. You cannot cherry pick one sentence and use it to say everything without reading it all together and with context. But if we need a simple phrase to describe what the report says, again, I would tell you multiple systemic failures. I want to first thank the mayor of Uvalde for hosting a meeting today with several of the families and asking for us to come by and attend, and I thought that was the respectful thing to do. I thought it was respectful to at least let them hear from me before we open this up to a broader public discussion. I look forward to the questions here at the press conference. One of the things that I said in there to the families is we want to show them as much respect as possible. The entire time, we wanted to show them the much respect possible, and we've tried to do that. And I asked them if there was something we've ever done not respectful to let us know what it is. But I told them the most we can do to be respectful at this point is not to just blame one person or one thing. And I hope that the report, when people read all of it together, they understand that we look and take a broad approach to what happened that day. My biggest fear, and I also shared this with them at the meeting, is that we will look for simple solutions to these complex answers. And we will all look and say, well, you know, that's the way it was in Uvalde, it's different here. Well, let me tell you, the people of Uvalde before this, they felt it couldn't happen here. They felt that. That's the false sense of security I worry about. I think some of the same systems that we found here that failed that day are across the entire state and country. And I do not want to say because of one thing or one person here, it could not happen elsewhere. I think that's a disservice and not the respectful thing to do. This committee was created by Speaker Dade Phelan, and I'm so appreciated he did this. He formed this committee just 44 days ago. And I believe this committee has driven things to the forefront. I believe that because of this committee's work, some of the records have already been changed, and hopefully with this report, a lot of the record is set straight. This committee is a fact-finding committee. Our job was essentially to figure out what the facts were and report it. It's a bipartisan committee. And the reason it's bipartisan is because the problems are not Republican problems. They're not Democrat problems. They're all of our problems. So I'm very proud the Speaker made this a bipartisan committee. There are other committees in the Texas House and Texas Senate that will look at this report, look at the facts that we found here, and discuss and debate the policy that needs to be changed to try to make Texas children safer going forward in the future. I'm a policymaker. My colleagues up here are policymakers or have strong opinions about changes to policy that need to be done. Today is not the day that we're going to share what our strong feelings and convictions are about that. That was not the task of finding the facts. After some period of time, we will put our policymaker hats back on and share those opinions with the committee and others about what we think needs to change and what's done. But right now, we're going to let the report speak for itself and focus on the facts that were found in there. The committee met with more than 35 witnesses. Those were done in an executive session. That is the precedent of the House in the past and will likely be the precedent of the House going forward. Being an executive session, meaning the people and witnesses who attended did not have the cameras on them and did not testify for the public at large to hear. We believe that that probably allowed us to get their testimony quicker, And also they were more candid and more conversational, allowing us to do our job more accurately. Other committees in the state of Texas do have subpoena power and will have the opportunity to subpoena those witnesses for y'all to hear what they have to say for themselves. But that is the precedent of the House for an investigative committee to do this in executive session, which is what we did. In addition to the 35 witnesses that we interviewed, there were 39 independent interviews that our investigators, who did a phenomenal job, held to help us. We reviewed crime scene photos, audio and video from the incident, 911 calls. All of that went into trying to get this report compiled in 44 days so that we could deliver this here to Uvalde, and hopefully you will find this reflective of the facts that we basically could get to. Let me tell you a little bit about the report. We talk about the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District. And let me say this. With hindsight, we can say the Robb Elementary was not adequately prepared for the risk of a school shooter. The school's 5-foot fence was inadequate. Despite a policy of locked doors, there was a regrettable culture of noncompliance. In fact, all 3 exterior doors to the building were unlocked that day, and multiple interior doors were not secured the day of the shooting. When I talked about the false sense of security, I do not believe that Uvalde Consolidated or Robb Elementary is the only school with these issues in it. I've talked to enough other educators around the state to believe this is a wider problem that we need to continue to look at. We discussed the attacker. You will first notice we did not use his name. When we wanted to release the hallway video to the members of the families and the public, we were not going to show his image. He wanted that, and he did not deserve it. He did not deserve to have that recognition of his face or his name shown because it's what he wanted. Also, there are cultures online who look and believe that when they see these videos, there's something to be inspired by. We did not want others to look at these videos and to watch it and be inspired by it. We only wanted to show the law enforcement response. However, we did give you a more comprehensive look at the background of the attacker. We refer to him that throughout the report because that's how he refers to by the alert training. He fits the profile of many. He came from a broken home with little to no interaction with his father. He struggled in school, both academically and socially. He struggled to fit in and eventually became isolated. He networked with his peers through social media and violent video games, and ultimately had a fixation on school shootings and even developed the nickname School Shooter. We also talk in this report about the failures of law enforcement. There's really 2 categories to think about when we talk about this. There is an early decision to treat this as an active shooter versus a barricaded subject situation. If you know, and the training and standards we set for officers is if you know there's active shooting, active killing going on, or somebody is dying, the standard is you have to continue to do something to stop that killing or stop that dying. That day, several officers in the hallway or in that building knew or should have known there was dying in that classroom. And they should have done more, acted with urgency, tried the door handles, tried to go in through the windows, tried to distract him, tried to do something to address the situation. In fairness, there were many officers at that scene who were either denied access to the building, were told misinformation, some were even told false information. Some were told the police chief of the Consolidated Independent School District was actually inside the room actively negotiating with a suitor, such that they did not know what was happening. They did not have the opportunity to do that. But that's not where the analysis stops. Everyone who came on the scene talked about this being chaotic. The training suggests that that chaos should not happen. Inside the school, there should be a tactical commander, someone who's taking lead on dealing with the actual in the hallway. But there should also be an overall commander. Somebody who's in overall command, flowing the information, making sure everybody knows what is going on. The fact that there was no overall commander outside the building where there should have been one should have been known by many. At a minimum, there was multiple opportunities, depending on the relative training and experience of law enforcement officers, to at least ask more questions or offer their guidance to try to remedy the chaotic situation and make sure there was effective overall command. There was a lack of effective overall command that day. Members, I am going to recognize my colleagues for some brief statements, and then we will answer the questions here today. Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joe Moody, a Democrat from El Paso. I'm a former prosecutor. I've worked on issues like criminal law and mental health for my entire legislative career. And most importantly, I'm a father of 3. And sadly, I've dealt with mass shootings before. In just 2 weeks, it'll be the 3rd anniversary of the day a young man with a rifle murdered 23 people in El Paso. After that, we all kept asking why. Why did this happen to us? We're here today to provide some of those answers in Uvalde. And while this information will never make up for the unspeakable loss this community has endured, El Pasoans know how important it is to know. I also know the report we've given points to something very complex. It's hard to hear that there were multiple systemic failures because we want to tell ourselves that systems work. We want to tell ourselves there's one person we could point our fingers at. We want to tell ourselves that this won't happen again. That's just not true. What happened here is complicated. But there's also a call to action in this report, because systems are something that we can and must improve. I see the report as a baseline of information that we can all work from. So often these days, politics starts with the answer and doesn't even care about the facts. Here, we're starting with the facts, the most thorough, reliable report that's been done on what happened at Robb Elementary. There's more to do, but this report is a shared platform for us to work from together. The shootings in Uvalde and El Paso have important differences. So do Midland, Odessa, and Sutherland Springs, and Santa Fe, and on and on. But they also have important similarities that we can understand and address as a state. Although today isn't the day for that discussion, that's what this report can and must lead to. I made a promise to the people of El Paso that I haven't forgotten and that I will never forget. To do everything in my power to make sure the legislature understands what happened and why, and to fight for the solutions that we deserve. I make that same promise here today in Uvalde. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Moody. Justice Guzman.
Good afternoon. I'm Eva Guzman. I'm a former Texas Supreme Court judge, and I'm the public member of this committee. For the past several weeks, we have traveled to Uvalde and to take testimony, to hear firsthand what took place and in pursuit of the truth. We did so at the request of Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan, who charged us with delivering answers to the families who lost their loved ones and who seek to understand what happened that day. How could there be so many multiple systemic failures? As our state and our country mourn the tragic deaths at Robb Elementary, our committee unpacked the evidence to discover and report the facts. As a former judge, I spent much of my professional life ensuring that the facts I relied on to make decisions were accurate. I brought to this process that same determination. After all, accurate facts have to provide the backdrop for any policy changes that will come out of this. Throughout the investigative process, our only agenda was to follow the facts and the evidence. As John Adams famously said, whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of the facts and the evidence. That's where we placed our focus. There, we found the truth about what really happened at Robb Elementary that day. But we also found the reality of the breakdowns in procedures and protocols and processes, of the breakdowns and failures in judgment and decision-making that occurred before and during the tragedy. That truth, it's heavy and it's hard because it lays bare human failures and it makes us confront collapses in our systems. They were supposed to work. They were supposed to protect the innocents who now lie in their graves. Today we stand before a community that's still gripped in grief. With this report, families who are crushed by sorrow and pain will now have desperately needed and deserved answers. But no report can heal the broken hearts. Only God can do that. Knowing the truth, we hope, will equip Texas lawmakers and leaders with information and knowledge that will guide them in deciding next steps. We hope the truth about this tragedy will also give this community the resolve to forge a path forward. I come here with humility and respect, and I am here for you, for the people of Uvalde.
Thank you. Pursuant to the House rules, before a question is asked, we will have to have a witness affirmation form, or as I said, you can email it to the committee clerk. Are we ready for questions at this time, Matt? Okay. Yeah.
When you ask your question, could you tell us your name and what news affiliate you represent? So with that, we'll start with the media with questions. Could you state your name and your affiliation? Thanks.
So what I am telling you is we have substantive committees that have already been formed. The governor formed those early on, and the Speaker of the House formed at the same time 44 days ago this has been done. They've already been working on this. We now have some baseline information we can report to the legislature, help them basically make some decisions about systemic failures. I think each community can look at the things we've laid out in this report and make some determinations about how to prevent that from happening. I will tell you, not as a legislator, not as a chairman of this committee, but as a father, I have asked teachers at my schools, principals at my schools, and others about some of the things that we learned to find out what the culture is and intend to continue to work on it. I think it takes everybody to continue to ask questions. Next question. Okay.
Why have we heard so many different messages that were misleading and frankly lies of families here involved who don't know what it means when people are staying at conferences and saying?
Thank you, Mia. I'm going to start with this. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they want to comment on it as well. multiple systemic failures. Our report does not look at other comments that have been made to try to compare or contrast them whatsoever. We laid out the basic facts as we were charged with to do. And what I said early on about law enforcement, the officers who knew or should have known that this was an active shooter situation by their training experience should have done more. We are very clear on that. Not every officer on the scene had that same information and had that same opportunity to comply with their training. One of the things this committee has not done, because we're a three-person committee, is to go through and determine which law enforcement personnel knew what did they know, and when they knew it. In order to do that, I think that's going to take many months to go through all of the different video, body camera footage, and to figure out, and I think there's other investigatory arms trying to figure out what did this person know, when did they know it, and what did they do with it. And I think you're going to need all of that to try to make all of those questions. But we do say there was chaos on the scene, and certainly with the chaos, people should have asked, why is there not an incident commander? Why there's not an overall commander outside the building helping try to organize that? Representative Moody or Justice Guzman, would you hold on a second? I was going to let them do this.
One of the things that we've learned from this is the importance of an incident commander and the information that's relayed out. We know we didn't have that here, and you're asking why the information was told the way it was. Who knew what, when? The failure to have an incident commander on the scene to receive information and to communicate with the media, I believe, in part led to some of the information that was reported inaccurately.
Okay. Representative Moody.
Just to dovetail on that, because I think the question is looking at maybe how information flow went post the incident. And there is a section in the report about information flow and how we believe that it is incumbent upon law enforcement as they make reports to report what is verifiable, understand what is verifiable and what is not verifiable. So when the chairman talks about multiple systemic failures, one of those is the handling of information in this investigation, and that's why it's in the report in that section.
Okay. Next question. Yes, over here. Oh, we're on the next question.
Could we just hold it to one follow-up and give everyone else a chance? Rosa, go ahead.
So what I'm going to tell you is this. Today is about what the committee was tasked to do. It was tasked to come up with the facts. And that is what the committee was charged with by the Speaker. After a modicum of time, and by the way, there are other substantive committees that have explained this, looking at the policy and is going to debate everything. After a modicum of time, out of respect for this report, all of us, I assume, will have the opportunity to make the comments about the policy, the changes, our feelings, and what we think ought to be done. But today is not that day. If you ask me that question again, sooner than later, I'll answer it for you. I'll be glad to answer it for you. And I think the members of this committee would be happy to do that. Just not today, out of respect for what we've been asked to do and the report that we have. Hold on a second. Name and who you're with. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to tell you, it's a great question, and it's one that I wish I was in a position to answer about all of the mechanics of it. We spent 44 days looking at the facts to lay those out. Each different officer who is connected to an agency is going to have to do their own internal review. Everybody's going to have to figure out, as I said, who knew what and when. And if somebody failed to exercise their training, if somebody knew there were victims in there being killed or dying and did not do more, I believe those agencies will have to find accountability for those officers. But that is not what we are tasked with in this report to come with. And I understand that, but what we have done is put the facts forward so others can take a look at that. Representative Moody or Justice Guzman.
Those facts will allow those agencies to take a deeper dive into the actions of law enforcement and hold them accountable. The report says if you're not willing to put the lives of the people you serve, of those children before your own, In my view, you should find another job.
It's public record. I mean, everyone has it at this point in time.
Next question. The lady in the hat over here. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I actually learned from it from your reporting for the first time. It was not a meeting that we organized. We came at the mayor's invitation. I don't know the specifics of it. Had not had a chance to actually find out, but certainly there's nobody that I'm not willing to visit with and help understand, deliver a copy to. And if somebody, a family member did not go into the meeting, I'd love to know the circumstances, love to sit down and visit with them. Happy to do that one-on-one, but that was not, I did not ask anybody, obviously, not to be there.
NBC back there in the dress. Go ahead, yeah.
All of those open records that media have put in, no one's received any information. Will all of those documents be released from the investigative report that y'all have given?
So the answer to that is we will go with the House precedent on investigatory committees. When a House investigatory committee is formed, we do our work in executive session, and the documents that were delivered, most of those I legally cannot release unless I'm given permission to from a non-disclosure agreement. I've tweeted about that and made people aware, and happy to share the non-disclosure agreement with you. But our hands are tied by precedent and some of the things that we had to do to obtain this. And also, I don't know if there's any other investigations that have been alluded to, but I wouldn't do anything without consultation with the investigators in order to get something done to make sure they're okay with it, to jeopardize that.
The person in the glasses with their hand. Thank you.
With regard to the 376 police officers that were involved, what's their duty status? Are they still on the street?
We are not advised at this time. You're going to have to talk to the different individuals, the agency heads, and again, I'm assuming they're going through a very complicated review of looking at body cam footage to figure out what information was actually available, what was not, those types of things, and we do not have able to do that. This
Lady
time.
in the back with the face mask. I know there's a lot, but you know who I'm talking about, right there in the glasses.
To make sure I understood your comment, in my report, I think I've got it. So in my report, I laid out that there is up to 80,000 school buildings that the children of Texas attend throughout the days of the school year. And does it seem like a Herculean task to actually overcome that? I'm going to make a quick comment, but I think my colleagues want to make sure they get a chance to answer as well. We put that fact in there to make sure that when we talk about school hardening and school safety measures or whatever that is, people remember there are 80,000 buildings in the state of Texas. And that is, but you know what? We have to recognize that as we talk about this policy. Representative Moody,
had an opportunity to visit with educators from Rob, not just during this process, but today as well. And that idea of security and safety and moving forward, specifically for them and for this community, is something that they're focused on, and we are helping focus on that with them. But I think that the broader point about lessons learned and moving forward, and why that number is important to know, is that it is a large task. But our priorities, if our priorities are safety and security of our kids, then that is the task at hand. And so the job that we had here to set out facts to understand what's going on, that is an important fact to know. And my kids are in 2 of those campuses back home, and so do I care about that? Am I going to visit with folks back home like the chairman has? Absolutely. And then we have an obligation going forward at the state level as well.
Justice Guzman.
There's a section in the report on the school and the administrators. It's my hope that every school district takes some time to read this report. There were multiple systemic failures, including not locking doors. I hope that every school district can look at this report and glean something from the lessons, this unfortunate and tragic.
The lady standing up in the dress by the cameras.
Hi there. I'm Maria Guerrero with NBC5 in Dallas, Fort Worth. Please afford these 2 questions. One is for your reaction and another
So this is so the question was about the mayor's most recent actions. I saw him earlier. He made mention of that. I don't know if our report, gave him the emphasis to be able to do that or not. I'm not aware. But obviously, you would need to talk to the mayor, and I respect the mayor's decisions, after reading the report into doing, what he thinks needs to be done to protect the people of Uvalde. The second question that you asked was, remind me? Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we do not specify which officers should have taken over command in here, because that'd be kind of a little bit of our opinion as to who should have. What I will tell you is this. There were officers in that building who knew or should have known more needed to be done. And there was also officers who should have seen some of the chaos going on, and at least, at a minimum, if they didn't take over command or try to assume command, they should have began asking questions or offer their support and guidance. And eventually, maybe they would have gotten command to have a better response from that.
Lady in the front row, go ahead.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
So there are autopsies and medical examiners that we do not have access to, and I do not believe have been complete. I've never been a doctor. I've never gone back in and done forensic exams. I'm not qualified to basically tell you who would or not have. We've talked to enough to know what we were able to say, and obviously if we get more information, this is a preliminary report. I want to be very candid. The decision that we made was we have done at least enough at this point in time to be able to issue a preliminary report. I am not telling you it's conclusive, and I think there's other things out there. That's certainly one of them that could be done.
Lady in the front row, please. State your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
Federal, we don't have we do not have jurisdiction over federal officers, agents to basically, force them to comply with the subpoena to bring them in. So that's one of the things that, we did not, and a lot of them have body cameras.
Lady in the back row with your hand up, please. You got a follow up? Okay, go ahead. We got a short time, so let's try and move it along.
Before you ask that, Representative Moody wants to follow up on that as well. I want to make sure he has good time as well. Hold on. Representative Moody's going to comment on that first.
Okay.
We'll get to you. We'll get to you.
Just for a matter of completeness, while we didn't have the ability to compel participation, there were statements taken from federal agents. Those we did have the opportunity to review and understand, but there's a difference between reading a statement and having the opportunity to question somebody live. So that's for context.
Okay, back behind me here, this gentleman.
So that was confirmed to us by the investigation being done by the FBI and DPS. They confirmed that with the video evidence. As far as it, and certainly that's commensurate with, I think, what you hear in the audience.
You good? Okay.
This is the first.
Okay.
This is the first 2.5 minutes. The report was last 100 rounds.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
El reporte preliminar habla que no hay un responsable, que no hay un villano. ¿Qué va a pasar con los agentes involucrados? Posiblemente se le pueda aplicar cargos. El mensaje en español para mucha gente que no sabe inglés.
La pregunta es sobre el villano. El reportaje identifica un villano, el que mató a los niños. La segunda parte de la pregunta es, ¿qué va a pasar con los del Departamento de Policía que estaban allí, 376, que estaban presentes y 77 minutos antes de que entraran al cuarto? El reporte identifica los hechos. ¿Quién los va a ser responsables. Será un proceso por la agencia, por quien trabajan. Me imagino y sé que puedo confirmar que están revisando qué pasó, cuándo pasó, quién sabía qué cosa. Y eso es algo que la gente de Uvalde necesita, ¿verdad? Esas familias necesitan saber que alguien va a identificar quién tenía más responsabilidad, quién sabía más. Gracias. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Robert, go ahead.
Second question is a phenomenal question. Justice Guzman has brought that to my attention multiple times, as has Representative Moody. Yes, absolutely, it is only appropriate to do that, and that will be done. Your first question had to do with Chief Arredondo, and as far as taking over command. In our report, we did put some specific quotes from him in there. I would direct the audience and you and everybody to what he actually said and quote him directly. But essentially, he testified that he felt like he was not in command. That all being said, he certainly during that day, took actions, and I think would agree and did agree that if anybody was in charge of at least the response south of the door versus north, it was him, at least until Bortak arrived and took over the tactical command, and they're the ones who made entry.
Okay, lady in the back by the camera with her hand up. Yes.
Let me say this, that I think Representative Moody, I'm going to let him answer it, and then Justice Guzman, and make sure she be able to translate parts of it, what she wants to say in Spanish. It is clear that this report does try to address the impact of the misinformation on the community. Who knew what, when, and how it flowed was clearly issues and has created some problems, and the back part of the report certainly does touch on that. And our report speaks to that very directly, very clearly. And I want to thank Representative Moody for taking part of the lead on helping that, and I'd like him to be able to give the opportunity to say some more, and I'm going to let Justice Guzman speak to that some more as well.
As we worked on this and understood that there were multiple systemic failures in security and in police response and in the life of the attacker, right? And how those systems that we have didn't address any of that. What became very evident to us also was that the information flow exacerbated the pain of this community that was told to us multiple times. That those the back and forth or the out of context or the mistruths or half truths were harmful in and of themselves. And so it was, as we discussed multiple systemic failures, we said we have to address that this portion of the investigation was also a failure and has caused a rightfully cynical approach to the way this committee has done its business, even though, as the chairman stated, this is the way investigative committees always work. But when you lay that on, we don't operate in a vacuum. When you lay that on top of the situation as it was, or as it is, then you have to address it and put it forward. That's why it's in the report. Because our job is not to, and we saw it very clearly, is not to add to that confusion, but to create stable, level ground that unifies facts that we can then build from. There are many of us that in this community and across the state that want to know where we go next in a lot of different areas. I know as policymakers, we're going to turn that corner and do that too. But you cannot do that without a stabilizing force of facts. That was our mission here. That's why we addressed the fact that information flow was part of the systemic failure that occurred here in Uvalde.
Justice Guzman.
Quiero clarificar que el reporte se va a traducir a español en las próximas semanas. La pregunta, claro, la pregunta es sobre el impacto de la información, la falta de confianza. Lo estamos escuchando aquí, la falta de confianza de cómo se comunica la. Let me get through this one answer and then we'll address your concerns. Thank you. Yeah. La falta de confianza en la comunidad porque la información que recibieron era diferente. Una persona decía una cosa, otro decía otra cosa. Esto causó dolor y confusión en la comunidad. El reporte habla sobre eso. Y habla sobre que fallaron los sistemas, no solo los oficiales, sino las personas que estaban comunicando. Y esperamos que esta información en el futuro produzca un sistema donde la información que la comunidad recibe es correcta y que no tienen que escuchar 3 veces la información y cada vez es diferente. Gracias.
All right. As I stated at the beginning, we have to make a 6 o'clock mass. This is going to be the last question, and that goes to that lady right over there in the blue.
So 2 things in the report. We go to great pains to try to set what actually the context of that statement related to the evacuation. I think when you read it all together, I'll do that. Let me address the key because I think this is very important. A lot of questions have asked about it. The statements from BORTAC were, yes, they put a key in the door and they unlocked it. There is enough information to be very uncertain whether or not that door was ever locked. The committee believes, based on all the testimony and information we've received, it was very likely that door was either not locked or secured at the time. However, I am not willing to tell you with 100% absolute certainty that we know, and we may never know, whether or not that door was actually locked and secured at that time. But there's a strong emphasis, and we put it in the report, that it is more likely than not, very strong, that if somebody had just gone up and tried the door handle, they could have opened it without a key. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That'll be it for today. We've got to get to Mass. The Archbishop has invited us, and we're going to move on out. Thank you so much.
All right, so you have been listening to a press conference from the Texas House Committee investigating the Uvalde school massacre. Just ended abruptly. You could see it is still going on. A woman is there still trying to ask a question. Today, they released a detailed preliminary report of what happened that tragic May 24th day. State Representative Dustin Burrows, who you just saw, he's the chair of that investigative committee, said that there were multiple systemic failures. Now, this preliminary report is 77 pages long. We're going to have much more on those findings coming up on the KHOU 11 News at 5:30. We'll see you then.